So risk, basically we are talking about environmental risk management in this lecture. So risk characterization is the process of estimating the incidence of a health effect under the various conditions of human exposure described in the exposure assessment. So the results of risk characterization are used to identify potential options that are then evaluated in terms of expected public health, economic, social, and political consequences. Now, characterizations of risks. Avoiding Bhopal tragedy type incidents. Quantitative risk characterization. So quantitative characterization involves the calculation of a simple risk ratio, that is PEC upon PNEC. That is PEC is basically the predicted environmental concentration PEC, and PNEC is predicted non-environmental, maybe no, to the predicted concentration at which no effects on organisms in the compartment PNEC will occur to the potential effective concentration. Okay, I'm sorry. PEC is basically the potential effective concentration, and this is the predicted concentration at which no effects on organisms in the compartment PNEC. Okay, so grade one grading of risk. Grade one is low risk, rare, occurs less than 0.1% of the time. Grade two, low to medium risk, may happen, occurs between 0.1% and 0.1% of the time or cases. Grade 3 is medium to high risk, quite often occurs between 1 to 10% of the time. And grade 4 is high risk, very often occurs more frequently than 10% of the time. So, steps to risk assessment, hazard identification and risk assessment, HERA. Hazard identification and risk assessment, HERA, study offers the systematic approach to assess hazards and their associated risks that may offer an objective measure of an identified hazard as well as provide a technique to manage the risk. Now, Aloha software. Aloha stands for Aerial Locations of Hazardous Atmospheres. Aerial Locations of Hazardous Atmospheres. So Aloha is a hazard modeling software program for the Cameo software suite, which is used widely to plan for and respond to chemical hazardous emergencies. Materials emergencies. Now, environmental risk assessment. So it is a method of assessing, mitigating, and monitoring the effects of a recognized risk that may have the potential adverse effects on the public and environmental health. So HERA and Aloha are two important points in this presentation. So HERA is basically hazard identification and risk assessment, and Aloha is area location of hazardous atmospheres. And so that's it about this lecture. We'll move on to our next lecture, which is global warming and climate change. So the temperature on the moon varies from 130 to minus 130 to 120 degrees Celsius, as no CO2 is there. The average temperature on Venus is around 460 degrees Celsius as CO2 atmosphere. Global warming refers only to the Earth's rising surface temperature, while climate change includes warming and the side effects of warming. Average temperature on Earth is around 13.9 degrees Celsius. So the current rise in global average temperature is more rapid than previous changes and is primarily caused by humans burning fossil fuels. Right? So fossil fuel use, deforestation, some agricultural and industrial practices increase greenhouse gas production like carbon dioxide and methane, CH4. Large amounts of these gases trap more heat in Earth's lower atmosphere, causing global warming because of the greenhouse effect. Now, due to climate change, deserts are expanding while heat waves and wildfires are becoming more common. Increased warming in the Arctic has contributed to melting of the glaciers, melting permafrost, glacial retreat, and sea ice loss. Now, the following gases are the main contributors of greenhouse effect: CO2, carbon dioxide, methane, CH4, nitrous oxide, N2O, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, HCFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs, and ozone in the lower atmosphere. Also CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, and ozone in the lower atmosphere. Their concentration is rising in the lower atmosphere. Cattle also give out methane. Now, higher temperatures are also causing more intense storms, droughts, and other weather conditions. Right now, rapid environmental change in mountains, coral reefs, and the Arctic is forcing many species to relocate or become extinct. Climate change threatens people with food and water scarcity, increased flooding, extreme heat, more disease, and economic loss. Human migration and conflict can also be a result. Many of these impacts are already felt at the current 1.2 degrees Celsius, 2.2 degree Fahrenheit level of warming. Additional warming will increase these impacts and may trigger tripping points, such as the melting of the Greenland ice sheet. Under the 2015 Paris Agreement, nations collectively agreed to keep warming well under 2 degrees Celsius. However, with pledges made under the agreement, global warming would still reach about 2.7 degrees Celsius or 4.9 degree Fahrenheit by the end of the century. Limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius will require halving emissions by 2030 and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Electricity generated from non-carbon emitting sources will need to replace fossil fuels for power and transportation, heating buildings, and operating industrial facilities. Carbon can also be removed from the atmosphere, for instance, by increasing forest cover and by farming with methods that capture carbon in soil. While communities may adapt to climate change through efforts like better coastline protection, they cannot avoid the risk of severe, widespread, and permanent impacts. Right? So, UNFCCC is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So, the COP21 or the Paris Climate Conference led to a new international climate agreement applicable to all countries, aiming to keep global warming at 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius in accordance with recommendations of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change IPCC. Right. So India's updated first nationally determined contribution NDC working towards climate justice. So the Minister of State for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Shri Ashwini Kumar Chaubey, said, as per the updated NDC, nationally determined contribution, submitted to UNFCCC in August 2022, India stands committed to reduce emissions intensity by 45% by 2030 from 2005 level, achieve about 50% cumulative electric power. Right? And that's it about the lecture. So if you have any questions, just ask in the comments. And thank you guys for watching.